Okay, we'll call this part 2 of my 2008 Hummer Misfire case study. I know that what you guys are hoping to see is borescope pictures, right? And I have to tell you that Mr. Kaplan and I, our engine teacher, we did the borescope pictures and we couldn't see anything at all. And what happened is we deleted the files by accident. So I don't care. You know, what this is going to boil down to is when we pull the cylinder head off, I'm going to show you the valve issue. And if I'm wrong, then I'm going to be wrong in front of all of you, and we're all going to learn from it. But I'm also going to be wrong in front of my boss, who has to spend the money on getting a new cylinder head for this car. So if you don't think the pressure's on me, it really is. Maybe I should have waited to upload part 1 to make sure that everything went well. You know what? I don't care. I think even if I'm wrong, which I know I'm not, it would be good for us all to learn from. So in this video, before we pull the head off and I get those shots for you, what I decided to do is revisit a lot of the tests. I revisited the in-cylinder pressure tests. I revisited the leak down test, doing different methods from some of your suggestions. In this video, I am going to show you what the map sensor looks like on a scope, and I'm going to show you what the intake vacuum gauge looks like. If you're looking for the repair for a misfire on a Hummer and you found this video, this is the wrong video for you. If you want to learn how to use different methods, different tools to identify valve problems, which is what we're doing, that's the primary focus of these next 2 or 3 videos, is let's see what tools we can use to identify this valve problem that we know that we have. So easier to do in hindsight when we know we have a valve problem. What we're trying to do is develop tools that will give us the ability to see valve problems on other engines, maybe that the spark plug is not accessible without removing the intake manifold. So hope you enjoy this one. Looking forward to your comments because they will affect our direction where we go next for part 3 and maybe part 4. Thank you very much. Alright, so first test I'm going to do here, if any of you guys want to follow along. Lenny and I did this one on Friday, and what we're doing is using the map sensor, which in theory will be able to show us an intake valve problem because the map sensor is reading manifold pressure. And what we want to see is we look for, you know, impulses, valves openings and closings. That's really what we're going after. To show you a picture of that, I have this in section 8 of my book.
Wait, a map sensor is that sensitive?
Yeah, it's that sensitive on a scope. You won't see it on scan data. You won't see it on a voltmeter. But if you look at this particular capture, I don't remember what this was on. It was a Hyundai or something. You see the right in here, the up-down pulses, and this is on a, what is this? About a 2-second time base, and you know, that's what those are. Those little impulses are intake valves openings and closings. And in theory, what we should have is a pulse in there every time that cylinder is pumping pressure up into the intake. We should see it.
So it should, like how it's dipping, it should jump up.
Well, right here I'm idling, and then at this point I'm doing a wide open throttle snap. And this is wide open throttle, and then of course they're getting closer and closer together because RPM's rising. It looks all hashy in here, but that's just, you know, the what's the word I'm looking for? It's just the engine breathing. That's how it breathes. It's cylinders firing, and we're drawing impulses in, if I could say that.
But how the pattern look is how, like at the very beginning, how it's all just dipped.
This here?
Yeah. How it
yeah.
Whenever you hit the one that has bad valve, would it jump up?
Well, again, it's a good question. Will we see a jump up with the one with a bad valve? Potentially. This is what we read about. I haven't used the map sensor for this yet, and we have a vehicle with a known valve issue. Let's see if we can see it. Now, one of the things that Lenny and I did on Friday, and I actually filmed it, was I put a vacuum gauge on it, and the other theory is you look at the fluctuations of the needle on a vacuum gauge, and we see what that looks like. And there was nothing on it. It was perfect. It was 18, 19 inches of vacuum at idle. The only thing we noticed at 2,000 RPM, it was actually a lot better vacuum, which you don't see a lot. Usually they're about the same, but again, I don't use that test enough to give you that every engine will be the same at idle and 1,500 RPM. I just don't know. I haven't done it enough. So anyway, this is where I'm starting with this. Let's see what the vacuum one shows. This one actually had a bad map sensor, all these glitches and dropouts in that signal. But really, this is kind of what I'm looking for on this vehicle. And I'm using the Pico for this because I want to revisit the transducer stuff and use the overlays that I have available with this scope. So first thing you see is spikes in the screen. I have the battery charger on. And battery chargers can do crazy things to scopes. So I think at this point we need to shut that charger off. You see those signals are gone. And my capture was on a 2-second screen, so we'll go with that. And I did bring in a second channel because I wanted you to see where the cylinder firings were. So I pulled in the #1 coil, which I can get to with everything together. All right, so channel 1's on my map sensor signal. Channel 2 is on my #1 injector, and it's a good question, Austin. Wouldn't I want to go to the number 4 that has the issue? The answer is yes, but the number 4 is under that intake manifold, not intake manifold, air intake.
Yeah, that piece
and I don't want to take that off yet because I want to do some fuel trim readings again, and I want to just kind of run down the line and see what we can see and see what we can't see, and we'll even revisit the leak down test where we'll actually put it at true TDC, compare 2 cylinders, and then move it within its range and really get a good handle of these tests, especially because we have a known issue. That's what's nice about attacking this with a known issue is you can really stay kind of one-track minded instead of going all over the place. We know we have a valve issue on this vehicle. What else can we do to identify it? That's really what we're doing here. Richard, can you start this for me, please?
Yeah.
And you want to sit in there for me and do a snap whenever I tell you?
Yep.
All right, so first thing is there's a lot of hash in this picture. That map voltage is pretty high. That 2 volts on a map sensor initially at idle. See, I'm not so sure what I'm looking at there isn't just hash from being connected to battery negative. And it's one of the things I told Lenny, before you overanalyze something like this, what we want to do is we want to use the sensor ground. When you have a lot of noise like this, instead of going to battery ground, which is where I am, that's the difference using a sensor ground. This is why sensor grounds go to the computer instead of the block. Reason why you have noise on the ground, you have noise on the signal, but if you have a voltmeter that's comparing the 2 noises and the noises are the same, what does a voltmeter read? Difference in potential. So what to do? Cancels out the noise. That's exactly what you're looking at. So relocation of the ground, man, really cleaned that picture up. And where we didn't have to add a filter to the scope, we add a filter to the scope or turn the sampling down, we may miss something we're looking for, right? We're looking for these little oscillations. That might not be the best time to do a filter or turn the sampling down. Let's look at it for what it is. And maybe it would help to have the scan tool connected right now and get a map equivalent reading. Let's do that. Snap that once real quick, Rich. Kind of see the little pulses. Right, hey Rich, right when it gets to right here, snap it for me. You're late on the draw. Right when it hits right there. One more time. Alright, so there's a couple of snaps. For me, if I were to look at that, going into this job and not knowing anything about it, I would completely move away from the map sensor. now we know what our problem is. Can we put a magnifying glass on it, maybe see something? I don't know. Initially, right there, I didn't see anything. What I want for you guys right now is I want a map sensor inches of mercury reading. That's a little bit high to me. I like a map sensor signal to be somewhere between 1 and 1.5 volts at idle. And it's 1.3 volts. There's nothing wrong with that map signal at all. I don't even need to do this, but we'll get the scan swap on it anyway. This is part of what we're going to be doing this week. Map sensors, pressure sensors, knowing how to check it. I mean, I do see little pulses in there, but is that a problem? It might be normal. How can we, before I put the scans on this, what we can do is we can well, nice thing with the Pico is we can kind of zoom on that area, and then we can pull this one back up in there. And really what I'm looking for here, guys, is just a reference, just a point of reference. This looks a lot different, doesn't it, Lenny, than what we saw previous. I'm just kind of pulling that guy up there so we can eyeball it. And here, let's. How many cylinders does this car have? 5, right? And what's my red trigger? What's the red line on the screen? Number 1 coil firing. So every time you see that red line, that's the number 1 coil firing. And I think if I'm counting properly, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it counts again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I am actually seeing something. I'm surprised. Do you see the up-down oscillation in the last 2? I may be reaching for something. Maybe if I throw a filter in this now, we can see it. Hold on. There's a little more up-down activity in some of those. It's pretty consistent, isn't it? What's our firing order on this? We need it again. All right, 13542. So this would be right here. This would be number 1, right where my cursor's at. Okay, that's number 1. This is number 3. This is number 5. This is number 4. This is number 2. Let me take the filter off. 1, 3, 5, 4, and 2. 4 and 2 look the worst of that, but again, would you think valve problem going into this initially? And I don't know. Do you guys understand what the impulses are? It's the intake valves opening and closing, isn't it? You can see them in the map sensor, no question about it. I think it's pretty cool. I know we didn't see this.
Why does some of them go below mine?
Why does some of them go below?
You see, like every other, like you see how it's like a big difference that it's dropping from the signal. Do you see what I mean?
Nope. You talking about the blue? You talking about the blue trace?
Yeah.
Like the height of them?
Yeah. Like if you're looking at the signal, is it just
I
from the
can't
map?
see like the other one is a little bit.
Are you talking about that big spike right there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just noise. Yeah, to me, yeah, that's a good question. Like, what do we do with, you're talking about this spike here and this spike here. That would be noise that, to me, as a scope user, I didn't even notice it. I don't have a good answer for you for that, other than doing thousands of waveforms and using a scope. You're going to see things like that.
Well, if you look at number 4, it is actually a little bit lower in the direction. Just
Are you talking about the spike?
No, the actual.
Oh, okay, all right. You're talking about the actual up downs now. Yeah, we can focus on that a little bit more, and for sure. Let's see what we get here. One thing to note though, just before we go any further is the vacuum gauge was completely steady. There was nothing that the vacuum gauge showed us. You read manuals and books and they tell you when you have a vacuum gauge that's fluttering, you have a valve problem. Yeah, no, not the case. Well, yeah, obviously with this car, that's not always the case. Now, is there a way we can make this signal a little bit more useful? I believe I can.
No, you did.
Hang on. What we could do is we could AC couple this map. Instead of zooming on that DC pattern, if we AC couple it, now we can take this down to 1 volt, maybe even something like that, so we can really analyze it. Again, ignoring the spikes. They're there. Ignore the spikes. They're not our issue. Freeze that picture and maybe throw a little bit of a filter on that. And that might be about as clear as we can make that. We'll just kind of look at the rotations of that. Now again, is that enough? Here's the point. Is that enough information to make a call on a valve problem that you don't know you have? We know we have one. So can we analyze this and be like, hey, that number 4, which again, this would be 1, 3, 5, 4, 2. Well, you know what? The number 4 does look lower than the rest, but then we also have to shift our perspective. Where's the valve open? When the voltage drops or when the voltage rises? And the answer is when the voltage drops is when vacuum is increasing. So you kind of have to shift your eyes a little bit here and kind of look at this part of the waveform, not this part. Does that make sense? When a valve opens, so here's the way a map sensor works, is when voltage drops, vacuum is increasing. So wouldn't it make sense that our vacuum is increasing in the manifold when the intake valve opens? So when it's dropping is when the valve is open. So your number 1 valve would be, well, I don't know where the, oh, you know what? I'm screwed up here, guys. I can't do what I'm doing as far as coordinating these. This is the number 1 coil fire, but the valve doesn't open the same time the coil fires. The valve opened 360 degrees before, right? Intake valve open? 360. So where's the number 4 in this pattern? Where would be the number 4 be? I was wrong about. I don't want to go there yet. Let's go back to intake valve openings. You guys understand that it would be, this part would be where the valve is opening, right? Okay. So I may want to like rethink that whole strategy. And the other thing too, that as far as analyzing this, is when you get a pressure rise in the intake from a leaking valve, it would be timed with something else. So being able to identify which cylinder is the problem here. Do you guys understand that variable I'm saying? It's one thing to analyze the valve openings when we get in our vacuum changes. It's another to analyze if that valve is leaking under compression, because that's not on the same event. It's later in the process. So which one would that be? And you know, looking at the low ones, that one's definitely lower than the rest, but I don't know. I think I just don't see this being, without practice, I do not see this being the tool that I would use unless it was severe. Like this car sitting here idling, we don't hear a misfire. It's only slightly rough. If I could make an intake valve stick open, I promise you we'd see it. How do we sync this? How do we interpret it? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, wouldn't it be? It'd be behind the number one cylinder firing, right? It'd be.
Well, yeah. Then we'd have to think about where number 4 is. The firing order, and see, I don't know cylinder pairings on this either. But yeah, 1, 3, 5, 4, 2.
It'd be different.
Those are definitely the cylinders that are in there.
Yeah.
Which one's which? I wouldn't be able to tell you which valve's which.
I thought Cap said there wasn't
No cylinder pairings on a 5-cylinder. They're all staggered. That makes sense. I'd like Cap to come in here for a second and talk to me about this.
I mean, if that's the case, it almost seems like it'd be two back, right?
One where it's firing, that one looks lowest to me, but
Yeah, lowest as far as you're looking at this area here. I agree with you, but this one isn't much different.
Then you get to the third one and it's cross. If you do the third one, if it was two back, wouldn't that be? I think this would be a way to chase your ass around in a circle.
Right, and you guys understand what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to learn a technique, that's all. And I'm okay with it, you know. I'm okay with yeah. I want to see this live again. And we'll put a filter in it. The filter's there.
If you do a flat out crank, would you lose any of your noise?
I think if you didn't know you had a valve problem, there's no way, in my opinion, you're gonna pick out a valve problem in there without maybe doing hundreds of them. Wouldn't you agree? Like if we knew for a fact that maybe they should all look like this and have that specific characteristic.
Wouldn't each vehicle be a different
Yeah.
form?
Yeah. It's neat we can see it though, isn't it? It's neat we can see intake valve openings.
Just love that.
Which one's my issue?
Well, we all get different ones. One of the passenger.
That's 720.
Wait, what is that 720?
That is 720 of the crank. And I just put in some cursors. So basically I put in the 180 degree cursor marks. So with the number 1 cylinder we would have our power stroke. Then we would have, actually that's pretty much how we figured out. Intake, compression, power, exhaust, right? So after the power stroke, what comes up next? So for the power stroke, we could call it compression, this would be power, the 180. And it's not going to be exactly the whole 180, but just hang with me here. This would be the power, and then what's next? Exhaust, and then what's next? Intake. This is the number, this should be, this area right here, should be, if I'm doing this right, should be the number 1 intake valve opening in that third partition. Does that, this one. Compression, this would be power, exhaust, intake, and this will be the compression of the number 1. I'm just talking about the number 1, just trying to identify where my intake stroke is. And I'm saying it's that one right there. So now we can figure it out. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Well, we can count forward and backwards. If this is the number 1, now again, I think it's valve opening here, the low portion. We can talk about the top portion though. Let's say, although I did AC couple it, does that change things AC coupled? It shouldn't. All right. This is number 1. This should be the number 3. This should be the number 5. This should be the number 4. And that would be the one to me that would probably have been the best looking of all of them. Are you with me? That would make this one the number 4 right here. So 1 over from our number 1 identification signal. Right? So where were we looking? We were looking at this. We were looking at this. Ain't even the right one. I think I synced that right. Does that make sense on how we figured that out? Look, true or false, these pulses that we are seeing are intake valves opening and closing. Think it's a 5-cylinder engine. How many do we have between the red square wave? We have 5 cylinders going. We have 5 unique humps in there. What are they? They're the freaking valves opening, so we can't argue that. All right. So it's as simple as, I think, it's the first time I've done this. We know that the red square wave is where the coil fires, and we know the turn off of the red square wave is where sparks occurring. That's why I put my cursor right there. So that's the power event, top dead center, very near. Now we're idling, so we may be 20 degrees advanced, whatever. Very near top dead center is where we're at on the tail end right here of this red square wave. So there would be the compression, and I'm sorry, from here then to here would be 720. We need 2 complete rotations, 4-stroke engine to fire that same cylinder again. Split it up into 4 partitions, and that's my 180-degree cursors I have in here. And we would have our 4 strokes in there somewhere. Not exactly timed with where my cursors are, but that would make this the power event, that would make this the exhaust event, and that would make this the intake event. Therefore, that makes, to me, that makes this particular hump my number 1 intake valve opening. Does everybody follow? And then plug your firing order in from there. This number 1, this will be what? Number 3, this is number 5, this is number 4, and this is back, sorry, let me start from, well, let me move this over a little bit. This third partition right here, that's our number 1. Number 3, number 5, number 4, number 2, back to number 1. So our focus would be this one right after, you guys follow? The one right after the turn off signal of the base. This should be my number 4 cylinder, the one we're worried about, okay? So let's look at a few more of them. And do you see anything with that number 4? Nothing that's unique. I mean, if anything, I'd say to the number 2 and the number 1. We were worried. Do you guys remember we were worried about the number 3 too, with lower compression? rather than zooming right now, what I'm doing is looking at a more live event so we can really kind of watch it. So I like that maybe a little bit better as far as watching those. And again, which one did we... Wait, let me get my trigger. Oh, that's not bad. We're pretty stable, aren't we? Kind of nice using that trigger to hold it there. You talk about maybe an advantage of knowing how to use a trigger. This would be it and how I did that. And now we're looking, instead of looking at a frozen picture and over analyzing one particular capture, we're looking at every single time being drawn in the same location. That's pretty cool. And again, this one right here is if we did it right, that should be my number 4. This is cool, but ain't no way you're calling a valve problem looking at this waveform. Not in my opinion, not from what I'm seeing. What do you think? Hey, all right, again, I'm AC coupled. With this AC coupled, we shouldn't see too many transitions on a snap. Snap that once for me. So we want to see a little bit more of that event, don't we? So let's move this line down. Yeah, do that again. Just want to catch that event. Do that again. Still went off the screen there, didn't I? Go ahead. And you don't need to snap it as much. Don't let it rev so high. Just go to the floor. Go to the floor real quick and then let off. That was pretty good, except we missed some of that, didn't we? Why did it go down that time? You know what? I'm gonna stop AC coupling this for a second, because I'm confusing myself with that. Snap that, Richard. Do it again. Alright, now, snap it. Alright, this time what I want you to do, right when it gets to about right here, actually it doesn't matter. I want a good rev this time. Let it go wide open as fast as you can to red line, let off. One more, just like that. One more. All right, cool. What I'm trying to do here, guys, is kind of the same thing that we were looking at, but now we're looking at it with some additional turbulence and RPM. And which one did we say? The second one over? So, was it the one right after? So our eye wants to be like on that one. You know, I'm thinking I need to do more of this. It's like, what's that? See how we have clear ones in here? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you get to this one. What is this? I mean, actually, we're looking at maybe the wrong side again, too. That, as pressure rises, vacuum's decreasing. So again, where are the intake valves opening? They're opening down here. Again, I'm looking at the wrong side. I should be counting here. So it'd be this one. Right? Let's put our partitions in here for a second. This is 720 right here. This is of the number 1. This would be power, exhaust, intake. So I don't know if it would be. Now we have an issue. Is this the number 1 intake opening, or is that the number 1 intake opening? My guess is it would be this one. And if that's the number 1, let's back up again and see if we're doing this right. If that's the number 1, this would be the number 2, this would be the number 4, this would be number 5, this would be number 3, back to number 1, so it would be that one. Cap, help me, I need you, I'm glad you're here. I'm doing some weird things, but just because we can and it's fun to do. So we're actually scoping the intake valves off the map sensor. We're scoping the map sensor out just to see what we can see. Okay?
So you're looking at negative pressures here.
When we see dips in the blue trace, would be when vacuum's increasing. And this would be, let me just show you the idle one first. For your neck. I'm sorry. I'll pick your brain in a minute. Oh, you're sitting down. Okay. Okay. What I'm doing is zooming in on my. That's my waveform of the map. Did you see how I got that, Cap? Here, let me show you again. This is the map sensor at idle. Okay. The red trace is the number 1 coil firing. I just needed to have a trigger in there for myself. And this was a snap throttle test. Looking at this at face value, there's no way you'd say you had an engine problem. We're just super analyzing. I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. So take a 360, 720 firing event, number 1 firing again.
Okay, that's 1-to-1.
1 to 1. And then what we can do is we can really zoom in on that. And then I can do something else that's pretty cool, Cap, is the tail end of this square wave is the base circuit off coil signal. So right there would be TDC, that's my spark. Well, not TDC, yes, correct, that's my spark. And then this would be 720 later, okay? And then in between here, I have my partitions, and really before we do the partitions, we see 5 unique characteristics in here, which makes sense for a 5-cylinder engine that we would have that. Now, when the signal drops on the blue trace would be when vacuum is increasing, because we're looking at a map sensor. So I believe what we're looking at is the dips would be the intake valves opening is what we're looking at, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm trying to do is identify where the valving is, because the valving's not the same as the cylinders as far as where the spark occurs. So like the intake valve is not going to be tied. I can't say that, you know, this is my number 1. But here's what I'm thinking. This is the number 1 power stroke. This is the number 1 exhaust stroke. You see the cursors I put in every 180? Can you see them on the smart board? It's right here, Cap.
Yeah, okay, I see it.
See the 180 cursors I threw in there?
Yeah.
I have a program that does, it's an overlay that the Pico allows me to do. So here's 180, here's 180, here's 180, here's 180. So it would be power, exhaust, intake.
You need them pressures at every 144 degrees, wouldn't you?
Why?
Because that would be the firing cost of that engine.
But it's still a 4-stroke. Intake, compression, power, and exhaust.
I understand that, but you got 5 cylinders.
But I'm just doing one cylinder. I'm just talking about
Okay,
one cylinder.
okay.
Just cylinder number 1. That's all I'm talking about right now.
So you're only looking at one cylinder.
I'm saying that's the number 1 intake valve right there is what I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Wait,
I want you to correct me if I'm wrong.
well, if you're looking at the map, I'm trying to get on the same page. You are,
I'm-
Bob, 'cause I think I'm the one that's really confused here. You've got
Stay there. I'll give you a laser pointer.
You've got number 1 firing taking place here,
Yes.
but all of these are all 5 cylinders before the next firing.
Correct. All the cylinders right here. This is the map
Exactly.
sensor. Yes.
So
Yes.
these are all spaced 144 degrees apart.
That's correct.
Now you're exactly right with looking at just number 1.
Yes.
You know, with 180 degrees of crank rotation.
Yeah.
180 degrees of crank rotation.
Right.
But that's not going to have any relationship to these, is it?
Yeah, it should.
How can it?
Well, I'm just dealing with the number 1 and where my intake stroke is for my number 1 is all I'm trying to get at, not the other cylinders.
Oh, okay.
I just
okay.
want to know which impulse in here is my number 1 valve that's opening, and if I know that, then I can count in my firing order and figure out where my number 4 is.
But if you.
And I'm saying it's this one. I'm saying.
Okay, but now listen.
Hold on, let me get my.
If you've got.
Richard, shut that off for a second, please. Let me plug in my. Yeah. Oh no, turn the key off because I have a frozen picture here. So.
Now.
Wait.
But what I'm
wait.
saying
Wait.
is-
Before I lose this
What is it?
file, I want to save it. We did some snap throttle tests, right? Snap throttle map tests. And this was, what is this thing? It's a Hummer. Make year 2008, right? And what engine is this? 3.7? Where do I put my engine at? Right here. 3.7. Need to make a new folder. 2008. Map. Okay, now we can play.
What? I can touch this now?
Yeah, we can
Draw?
use a marker. We can
Okay,
draw
good.
on.
Because here's. And again, I'm just thinking.
Well,
here.
let me get the foundation pieces in first.
Okay.
All right. So the trailing edge of this would be where spark is
Right.
occurring. Spark on the number 1. Okay. And then over here, the trailing edge of this square wave again is spark on the number 1.
Right.
All right. And then what I put in here is 720 cursors
Right.
because it's a 4-stroke.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's 4
right.
foot 5.
And I agree with that.
And then my partitions right here, this is 180 degrees.
But what good is that doing you in this waveform?
Just to identify my stroke so I know where in the 4-stroke principle
Right.
the number 1 is. So I know that in this one, my power is occurring on the number 1 because that's where spark just occurred.
Right.
And somewhere, not exactly at 180 bottom dead center, but somewhere in here, the exhaust valve is going to open. So this area here is going to be exhaust. This is just, again, the number 1 within here somewhere. And then after the exhaust, we're going to have the intake stroke. And then after the intake, we have our compression stroke. And then we're back to, so that's what all I was doing was saying by that this guy is my number 1 cylinder intake valve. Now whether I want to focus up here or focus down here. And I know what you're saying, the cylinders fire every,
140.
so there are no companion cylinders on this engine, correct?
It can't be because there'd be a lawsuit.
There'd be a lawsuit.
Yeah, one would be left out. So. Right?
Yeah. So I think with that, if somewhere in here, if we said this is my number 1 intake, then we just plug in our firing order from there.
But you can't say that that's number 1.
Why not?
Because part of
Okay,
that,
it's either here, here, or here is where my number 1 intake's
But
got to be,
what
just
I'm-
based on my spacings and
but
cylinder
I
fire.
understand that. I understand that. But here's what I'm getting at is in 180-degree event, there's more taking place here with the other cylinders. Why wouldn't you
For
break
sure.
it down? You know this is where your sparks occur.
Mhm.
So 44 degrees from this point, another spark's going to occur.
Okay.
Another spark, and that's going to break down.
Yeah, but that's breaking down your compression or your power strokes.
What's the difference?
Oh, we're
And
breaking down the intake
that, though,
strokes.
you can tell exactly which one of these are related to your.
Well, it's the whole thing. It's not any it can't be individuals. Can't be. It's the whole. Here's one. Here's one. Here's
Okay.
one. And then you're looking at half of one here, and here's the other half.
Yeah, I understand that.
So we got all 5 intake events going on right there. I don't know why we even have to do that. There is no question, Cap, between here and here, that we have 5 cylinders that have fire.
Right.
So
and I agree with that.
and so it's, I think, as easy as I'm just plugging in the. No, I'm trying to go backwards here. This would be 2. This is 4. This is 1, 3, and then the one that you can half see is 5. And that makes me want to focus here. That's what I'm trying to do. Just kind of number 4 is the guy we.
I see.
And am I looking it down here? Am I looking up here? And I think here's my other concern. All right. Okay, we can see the number 4 intake valve up, and that might not be where we want to focus, because what we want to focus on would be when the number 4 fires, because that's where those pressures are going to have that loss, or when we're on our compression stroke. So now we're talking about pressures going in the intake, where I'm looking in the wrong place for that to occur. I really want to be looking at where the number.
You know that number 1 sparks here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you understand? Before
Now,
we figure
this
that out.
is top dead compression.
Yeah, close enough.
180 before that is going to be bottom dead compression and the end of your intake
That's
stroke.
what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 180 before that's going to be the beginning of your.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay.
All right, now, so we're on the same page with
Yeah.
this. Okay. If we're going to analyze a waveform like this, and we're going to use a map sensor, it's important to understand that, okay, we're looking at the intake strokes here, but that's not where the problem's at. The problem is on the power stroke, when we get these pressure, we should have pressure increases in the manifold based on that leak down test. We should have pressure rises in the manifold, and we're not going to see that problem during the number 4 intake stroke. We're going to see it somewhere else where the number 4 actually is firing, which is going to be maybe somewhere in here, if that makes sense, that we would have that effect. You follow what I'm throwing at
I would
you?
say we're going to see it more in compression stroke.
Right, that's what I mean.
Then we're
So
going to see it on a power stroke because a power stroke.
that's what I meant. I'm sorry. I
meant
meant the compression stroke is where we should
focus on it.
Yeah, because that's when a piston squeezing, and then we'd have air leakage up into the
Right,
intake.
because that's pressure, but it's not enough to force develop.
So, will you agree with me that's the number 4? But again, do we care?
That's for intake.
That's for intake. Do we focus on that, or do we look for some other anomaly later? See, it would help to trigger off the number 4 instead of the number 1.
Perfection anomaly.
I don't know, something weird. I said a big fancy
I'm
word, didn't
telling
I?
you.
An anomaly. Is it lunchtime? It's past lunchtime. No, well, we'll take a late lunch. All right, so hold on. Our partitions that we have. We have, here's what we can do. We can actually add, but they barely have any sorts. We can add, a lot of new sorts. I can make 5 partitions. Love this. So what I just did now is, if you look and see the additional. So now what we have is where those cursors are would be roughly where we're going to have cylinder firing. So you're gonna have, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, and then back to that again.
That would be your 144 degrees.
Is it?
You have to be.
I think there's measurements for that, right? Well, we can do that here. We can go from, if you went from this cursor here to this cursor here, we should measure it 144.3. Pretty cool, ain't it?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's what you said.
So we know this is my next cylinder fire.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we can plug the regular firing order from there, right from, what is it? I keep forgetting the number. This is number 1 then, right here. This is number 3 firing. Firing now, we're not talking about intake valves.
Right.
This is number 5. This is number 4. This is number, where's that cursor at?
It's right there.
Number 2, and then back to number 1 again. So,
And you can actually see this has to be right here. This would have to be real close to top end
you're
compression.
looking right there.
Yeah. And look how you're kind of similar, don't you agree? But I'm not a waveform looker.
I know.
You know, look. I mean, come on, you're going to see different hash, but look at the difference here.
Well, and remember too, when we see this is a pressure rise.
Right.
Whoops, I can't spell rise. When we see those going up. Now what I can do, Cap, now since we're on the same page, we can start this and run it live, and I can have it live firing over and over.
You know,
at the
I
same
wanted you
spot.
to do this in the first place.
Oh, you did?
I just say.
Okay, no, we just attacked it
Because,
from different
right,
directions.
because again now, you know, 180 degrees from here basically is going to be the end of your intake, right?
Where's your point of
Like,
reference?
well,
Where are you
well,
talking
right
about?
here. If we know that this is our firing of 5,
Yeah, well, it's going to be close to there.
okay.
Yeah.
180 before that is going to be close to, you're at the end of the intake. 180 before that's going to be actually your intake. So,
All right, well, let's do that. Then you want to go backwards. Let's do that, because what I was saying, if you remember what we just did,
Right.
I was saying that this was the number 4 intake event, right?
Right.
Because it was the one after this is what we said that was the number 4 intake event. If you're right in what you're saying, then just as a double check of that is number 4. We're saying 4 fires here, right?
Right.
And so what we need to do then is we can pull in our cursor. Number 4 is firing here. Okay.
right.
And then, whoops, where's my other cursor at? Oh, it's right here. And you said 180, so we can back up. No, we can back up 100. Put this one here. That's what it matters. That's 0, so I'm looking at the scale. So we're going to go back. You said 180
Yeah.
is what?
That's going to be bottom dead center intake.
There's 100. There's 180 right there. That puts me,
Right.
this is my intake stroke on the number 4. Number 4 intake. Right? What's the pressure rise? Remember, pressure drop. Pressure, or I'm sorry, voltage drop equals what? Vacuum is increasing. this is 180 degrees before, right? This is, if we're saying this one right here is my number 4 firing. That's, you said that's 180 bottom, this is bottom dead center?
That would have to be bottom dead, or very close to that, bottom dead intake. Then 180 degrees, you're gonna go on compression.
And it may close it a little earlier or
Well,
later.
listen, here's what you need to remember.
Yeah.
We don't know cam profile of this engine.
No.
Okay? Intake valves always open early
Yeah.
and close late, sometimes way after bottom dead center. Okay? Exhaust valves open early before bottom dead center, close after top dead.
Keeping in mind too, when we're looking at this waveform, we're looking at the entire intake, not the in-cylinder pressure transducer. So there's things that are changing with another cylinder in the manifold, and we have to realize that too as we're doing this, right? I mean, we can't overanalyze this rise, but so we're on the same page. I was focused over here, and where probably we should be focused would be over here. For a number 4 valve intake problem.
I would think. I would
So-
think right in here.
All right, so now bear with me.
Okay.
So we got pretty much the one after, okay, 2. So let's call it the third one after the sink, after the coil fire. Okay, that's where we want to focus live. I'm going to make this live real quick before we take lunch. Cool. Focus right here. This will be just idle. And, you know, I was doing some snap throttle tests before, but truthfully, I shouldn't have to do a snap throttle test. It's a freaking idle misfire. If I can't identify it at idle, what good's the test?
Right.
It's no good to me at all. All right. We don't need to be on that kind of time frame. Maybe we do. Just adjust this for a second. Where we see 2 of these on the screen. That'll work. And let's zoom in on that. Zoom in on this a little bit more. Now we're live, Cap. And the one we should be looking at is about the 120 millisecond mark right here. I don't see anything.
If anything, this one fucked up.
Yeah. Well, this one too, at the 161 degree mark, ain't all that great either.
Well, again,
that's the number 4. The number 4, the one that you just said you don't like, which is at the 36.57 number.
but why?
Dude, that vacuum gauge is perfectly steady. 18, 19 inches at idle. When I held it at $2,000, what I was surprised to see is it increased a lot. It was like 22 at $2,000 and 18 at idle. I mean, normally they're pretty close to being the same, but I don't use that test much. So what's that telling me? What does this tell me? This doesn't tell me anything.
I gotta tell you something. I got paid.
Go ahead. That was cool though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree.
I think it's useful at some point in time,
Well,
Cap.
if the person can decipher it, that's the key.
Well, I think it has to be pretty severe, wouldn't you agree? To see it. This is what we need to do to your engine over there and tighten up some valves and stuff.
I agree.
Wow. There you have it.